Man, sometimes life really does throw you a bone. Like last week when I was busy quaffing champagne and patting myself on the back for reaching 1 million subscribers with some of the finest ladies and gentlemen on YouTube. Then right in the middle of the live stream we got word that Netflix's disastrous live action adaptation of Cowboy Bebop had just been cancelled barely 3 weeks after it got released.
Oh my god,
Drink a ban.
He's back.
Is this true?
Wait, is that true?
Actually,
Yeah, that's all true.
It's
No,
really-
I mean the thing that Drinker just highlighted, is that true?
Is that
we care more about Cowboy Bebop.
If it is,
When
I'm
is
leaving the stream
sentencing
and
now?
making
Do
money
we know?
immediately.
If everyone is about to cheer, if that is true. Like,
And I have to admit, my first reaction was... But it did get me to thinking, wow, there seems to be a real trend when it comes to shows like this. Masters of the Universe, Why the Last Man, and Cowboy Bebop all followed a similar pattern, and they all crashed and burned in spectacular fashion. But why exactly did this happen? Well, I applied my mighty intellect to the problem, and I believe I've come up with a theory. I like to call it the Drinker's 5 Steps for franchise destruction. It's a bit like that 12 Steps program that Gary's always trying to get me into, except this one actually works.
No way!
It goes a little something like this. Step 1. Pick a really popular IP with a loyal fan base. Step 2. Update it for modern audiences. Step 3. Antagonize the fan base prior to release. Step 4. Get cancelled due to low ratings. Step 5. Blame the fan base for steps 1 to 4. Anyway, because it's kind of fun to point and laugh at well-deserved failures, let's take a closer look at how Cowboy Bebop implemented the Drinker's 5 steps. Well, step 1 was easy enough. When it comes to popular IPs with a loyal fan base, it's tough to think of one more highly regarded than Cowboy Bebop, a space western sci-fi noir anime about a group of bounty hunters travelling across the galaxy aboard a spaceship called the Bebop. The series only ran for like 26 episodes, but it became famous for straddling just about every genre imaginable and exploring surprisingly deep and mature ideas with its complex cast of characters. Holy shit, even I've started watching it, and I've got to be honest, it's pretty fucking good. And this is coming from a guy who knows as much about anime as Seth Rogen knows about being funny. The point is that Cowboy Bebop is seen as one of the most influential animes ever made, and it's got an extremely loyal fan base in both Eastern and Western markets. So if you're a greedy corporation looking to profit from someone else's work and milk an existing fan base for all it's worth, then Cowboy Bebop is a natural choice. The problem, if you want to call it that, is that the show was made in the late 90s and it's got distinctly Japanese sensibilities that don't gel particularly well with the message. If it was going to be remade over here, then changes would be required. Which brings me on to step 2. Update it for modern audiences. The live-action Cowboy Bebop was first announced way back in June 2017. Development proceeded slowly, and it wasn't until 2019 that the cast was finally confirmed. Production was further hampered by injuries on set, not to mention the unspecified virus of unknown origin. So it wasn't until August 2021 that the first teaser images were released, and well, it didn't look good. None of the actors looked much like their anime counterparts, least of all Daniela Pineda as Faye Valentine. Not only was she a completely different height and build to the character, but instead of the flamboyant and seductive outfit she wears in the anime, now she was decked out in a dull as fuck leather jacket and oversized shirt. Not exactly thrilling stuff, and fans were quick to pick up on it, particularly when lead costume designer Jane Holland gave her thoughts on the matter. I do have to say, as a woman, I felt resistant to the idea of the lead female character being gratuitous or overly sexualized. It's not about it being not revealing, it's not about any of that, it's actually got all of those elements. But my take on it is that it's designed by a woman, and it was made by a lot of women, and it's worn by a woman. So the same elements are there, but they have just manifested in a different way. It's a pretty long-winded way of saying that her costume was too impractical for a real actress to wear, so they had to modify it to make it easier to use, which isn't entirely unreasonable to be fair. Unfortunately, fans interpreted this as, Faye's costume was too sexy and we think the male gaze is evil, so we dressed her down as much as humanly possible. Basically, it seemed like all the elements that made the original so fun and entertaining were being stripped away to make it conform to modern Hollywood sensibilities. Because obviously, you can't produce anything today which goes against the message. Which brings me neatly along to step 3, antagonise the fan base. See, there's a pretty appropriate axiom that I like to apply to situations like this. If in doubt, shut the fuck up. Clearly, the Faye Valentine controversy was a bit of a sore spot for fans, but ultimately it was just a minor aspect of the show and it probably would have blown over if everyone had just kept their heads down and got on with their work. Clearly, Daniela Pineda had other ideas and decided to release a video where she gave her thoughts on the situation.
First, I wanted to apologize to the fans that I did not anatomically match the Faye Valentine character. 6 foot, double D size breast, 2-inch waist. You know, they looked everywhere for that woman and they couldn't find her. It's kind of weird. So they just went with my short ass. I know. Am I right?
Oh, for fuck's sake. You just couldn't let it go, could you? I mean, this really is one of those situations where you ought to have taken a step back, considered what you were about to do, and asked yourself honestly, is this really going to help, or will it just piss people off, pour gas on the fire, and make me look like a total asshole? The funny thing is, I'm not entirely unsympathetic to Daniela's situation. First up, no amount of training is going to make you 6 inches taller and double the size of your chest. I mean, to be honest, they probably should have just cast someone else instead, but whatever. And as cool as Faye looks in the anime, well, I think it's fair to say her costume isn't exactly practical. These are valid points, but there's ways to get them across without making yourself look like a total dick. Maybe something like, I really love Faye's look in the anime, she's an awesome kick-ass femme fatale, but unfortunately there's only so much us human actors can do. We needed something a little more practical for the fight scenes we'd be doing, so hopefully we found the right balance here. But either way, I'm really excited to be playing her, so I hope you give me a chance. I mean, it's not perfect, and it obviously requires the consumption of liberal quantities of humble pie, but at least it strikes the conciliatory tone that you need. It acknowledges the complaints, shows you understand where they're coming from and that you're on their side, but that you still need to make some concessions to what's physically possible. And at the end of the day, you're just an actor trying to do a good job. It's pretty tough to stay angry at someone like that. Instead, she comes across as prickly, arrogant and condescending. You can practically feel the anger radiating from her and how pissed off she is that anyone would dare to call her out. Also, I suspect her little speech sounded a lot better in her head than the clumsy sarcasm we ended up with. And honestly, this video did so much fucking damage to the show's prospects. The mind boggles at how many thousands of people who otherwise might have given the show a chance took one look at this video and decided, yeah, fuck this arsehole, I'm out. Which is probably a good time to move along to step 4, get cancelled due to low ratings. After alienating a good portion of the fan base, it was no surprise that most of them didn't bother to tune in when the show finally released. And for those that did bother to watch it, nearly 60% of them had deserted it by the second episodes. Netflix couldn't wait to pull the plug on this stinker, and just a few weeks after the release, it was announced that Cowboy Bebop had been cancelled. Oh no, who could have foreseen this? Well, not scriptwriter Naomi Markman, that's for sure. And this brings me along to the final step in our process, blaming the fans. As soon as the cancellation was announced, Markman immediately took to Twitter to have a complete meltdown about the situation. Not to rub it in your faces, but as the individual who has read the Cowboy Bebop Season 2 scripts more than anyone else in this world, fuck, you're missing out. Mustafa Shakir didn't hold back either. Maybe the haters and the critics got us, or maybe it wasn't as good as we thought. Actually, Mustafa, I think you got yourselves on this one, and I guess that should be the big takeaway for all the creatives and executives behind this show. You basically killed it yourself before it even released, because you did almost everything wrong. But probably your biggest mistake was, well, trying to make the thing in the first place. There's a very obvious reason why so many people watch anime. There's a reason that a single manga can outsell the entire US comic book industry, and that reason is very simple. It's not made by people like you. It's not constrained by the ridiculous puritanical rules that have basically neutered Western movie studios. It's not trying to pander to social activist groups that'll never even bother to watch it, no matter how much you try to court them. It's not trying to relentlessly push the message. It's just there to tell a good story with interesting characters. In short, when it comes to anime, the art generally comes before the politics. And perhaps, just perhaps, you could take some time to reflect on that. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.